Askreddit by Lulpwand. Men who have sold donated sperm and gave permission for the child to contact you at 18. What is your story? Totally not an answer, but my GF and I were just wondering about whether there were any protocols for how much of one donor's sperm is allowed to be distributed within a given area. Like, what could prevent two moms from having the donor's offspring in the same area and having those kids grow up and meet as teens adults, start a relationship and realize they are related? Some clinics will put a cap on number of families, but there are cases of people have dozens, even up to 40, 80, 100 half-siblings. It brings up the ethics around this, and many donor-conceived people are vehemently against this and believe there needs to be a limit in place. So, I'm not the dad, but a kid. So my bio dad donated sperm and gave permission to be identified. Didn't even have to be after 18. In counting, because we're not sure if we've found all of us yet. There are 53 half-siblings, all his kids. My full sister and I didn't know we were donor babies until I was a freshman in college, and her a junior in high school. It was a few more years before we found out the scope of our family. As such, I never got to meet the man as he passed away in 2018, but I've been getting to know my half-siblings and I'm sad to have missed him. He apparently engaged in annual reunions and was interested in getting to know all of the kids if they, and their families, were open to it. We all support each other basically by default, even though we didn't grow up together. What's even wilder about him is that he got national news coverage for something besides his giant flock of kids. The guy got married to a woman the day he met her as a competition to be his bride in the Mall of America. It was apparently a heartfelt story, and the two of them had a 20-something year marriage with 4 kids that they raised themselves. The Mall of America even has a plaque with his name on it now, so you can go find him if you really try. The man was a weirdo, but in the best way. He was kind and generous with his time and really seemed to care about all of his kids, or at least the ones he knew about. This is bananas to me, but not because of the number of children, but because my mom was co-workers with your bio dad's wife. My mom shared that exact Moa story to me and it inspired The Bachelor. He was diagnosed with cancer at the time, and that's when my mom shared their amazing story. Never knew this part about him though. Oh hey, I can answer this. I'm not a donor, but I was donor conceived, along with my sister, same donor. I had a great dad and never had any desire to find out who my donor was, but I was always curious about siblings, especially when I learned there's no legal limit on how many children you can father when you donate sperm in the US. Well, 123andMe test later, and the first result on the top of the list is a half-sister in Texas. We get in contact, realize we have a ton in common, and it sparked a fire in her to find more siblings. She took an ancestry DNA test and the top of that list was a man in California, listed as father. She got in touch with him right away. Turns out he's a fantastic guy. He was adopted himself and also got in contact with his birth mom as an adult, so he had been on our side of the situation and was very open and willing to talk. His wife has been super supportive of us meeting too. He has 3 organically made kids of his own. I was especially ecstatic to learn that I'm a big sister. Plus we've since found 3 more half siblings who've all been very cool and excited to find each other. At this point, I've met all but one of them in person, and I got to meet my biological grandmother too. TL. Doctor, I went from having a dad and 1 sibling to having 2 dads and 8 siblings over the span of a couple of years. It's been pretty cool. That's super neat. I did a bunch of egg donations. I'm waiting to see one pop up on 23andMe, however the oldest would only be around 9, so I doubt I'll see anything for years, if ever. A guy I know in his 70s got a call from a guy in his 50s saying, "Hey, I'm your son. Oh, and I just learned I have a genetic disease, so your other kid should probably get tested." Credit to the guy in his 50s if that's the reason he called, just to warn his bio dad's family. Class move. I donated for 6 months in university. Twice a week. I gave consent to be contacted. That was close to 20 years ago now. I did call and ask once. My sperm resulted in 24 successful pregnancies. That was all the office could tell me. I have not done 23 and more anything like that. Edit, added a missing word. Sitcom title. 24 and My aunts had to get a donor for both children, and he happened to live in the same neighborhood. Can't remember if that was a coincidence or not. But he is a close family friend now. He comes over for their birthdays and other family events. They don't refer to him as their dad really, only as a joke, but he is very close with our family. My younger bro donated multiple times unbeknownst to me. Years later my wife and I did ancestry.com to get an idea of how diverse our backgrounds were, and wow. Started getting contacted by lots of people, over a dozen, saying we were close relatives. At first I was confused and asked the early ones about their parentage. They all had a similar stories. Single mom went to a sperm bank. Didn't take long to guess what happened. Call my brothers and asked. Younger one fessed up and said yes, he went multiple times. In fact they told him he had to stop donating because there was a statistical probability his progeny could meet and date. At least they seemed ethical. I asked if it was okay if I gave them his contact. He was fine with it. The weird thing is that they all had his face, like one look at them and it was obvious who their father was. Anyway, this went on for a co. I want to be a fly on the wall at this person's Thanksgiving. I was donor conceived. I took a DNA test, his natural born daughter took a DNA test. So really neither of us gave permission. There are 28 siblings so far. It was quite a shock. I wasn't expecting it and didn't know. I was 38. I've met the donor and most of the half siblings. He's a cool guy. I think it is eerie how I see many of my mannerisms in him and the other siblings. I know there is a wide range of emotions for people who experience this sort of thing, but for me it was generally positive. It is incredible how the similarities are passed down. My father-in-law had a daughter that was the result of a one-night stand and was adopted by a wonderful family. The adoption agency had a registration of birth parents and kids, who could each blind to the other give permission to be contacted, and only if both parties did, they'd put them in contact. So this happens in her early 20s, and they make arrangements for her to fly to meet her birth family, including my wife and her brother, her half-siblings. My wife goes to pick her up at the airport since the parents live out of town. There were no arrangements, no pictures, nothing. This was pre-Facebook. My wife saw her come out the doors, knew without question it was her, and she knew the same. They had a huge tearful hug without even any words. They just knew. By looks, by mannerisms, whatever. The incredible thing is, I've shown pictures of the half-sister, with or without her birth father and half-sister, and everyone agrees she doesn't actually look much like them. But there's something about the looks and how they act that is so similar between all of them. It really is incredible. Edit one more detail. We found out years later that the father and daughter contacted the agency to open themselves up to contact, within 24 hours of each other. A complete coincidence. The agency actually didn't do it for a couple weeks because they were trying to contact the daughter's adoptive parents who had passed away, hence the delay, because they just assumed there had been contact since they were in touch so impossibly close together. Not me, but a friend of my father-in-law. Guy is 86 and has been dealing with cancer for decades. He lost the will to live until one day he gets a call from his supposed daughter. He was a donor in the 70s and with ancestry.com they were able to reconnect. They were so sweet and have totally involved him in their lives. He has grandchildren he didn't know about and an entire family when he thought he would die alone. It's just a beautiful story. I get happy whenever I hear it because he is such a nice man. Funny enough, he has been cancer free almost exactly since they connected. They do say attitude is a huge recovery factor. At my job we did a media interview with a guy who donated sperm at least once a month for the money throughout most of his 20s, nearly 10 years. He recently found out that there is a Facebook group with over 100 women from all over the world that have had children from his donated sperm. Edit. This was an interview about his whole story, not a job interview where it just randomly came up. It was for an internal video made for TV executives and writers to potentially create a TV show based off his story. There's a sperm donor suing the company because they used his sperm so much and in a concentrated area they are afraid of accidental inbreeding. It was over 30 kids that they know about. In 23andMe subreddit, some dude found out his girlfriend of 5 1 year was actually his sister. Both were sperm donor babies. Edit, year was wrong. Link for 23andMe case. Sperm donor case. Obligatory, not me, but I don't think I'll get another chance to tell the story. An ex-girlfriend of mine has an uncle who had donated sperm back in the 90s. At some point, he started reaching out to the parents of his biological children to see if they wanted to meet their bio dad, and now, every summer, he flies out all the children who wanted to be in contact to Yosemite, CA for a week of camping. I remember the first, and only, time I went, I was shocked to know that at least 10 of his children come every year from all around the USA to spend time with him for a week. Apparently, the year I went with them was also the year that another one of his bio children got in contact with the uncle for the first time and spent the week out near Yosemite with all of her half-brothers' sisters. I don't keep in contact with the uncle or my ex anymore, but I can assume that more of his children have contacted him each year so they can spend time getting to know their bio dad. That's a future movie plot right there. I'm a child born via sperm donation. At one point in my life I did tons of research to find him. I also did ancestry and found some half siblings but no donor. But I thought about it more and looked over the records I did have from the donor company. He was a college student at the time and asked not to be contacted. He probably has a family now who may or may not know about his past donation, and my gut feeling is that he did it for the money. So I've decided to let it go. Somewhat related, but I've got a brother from another mother and have a happy story to share. My dad had a kid with a lady in the 80s. She didn't want to keep it and he didn't want to be a single dad, so he was put up for adoption and they split up and go about their days. There's likely a lot more to the story, but I've only ever been told my dad's side, so I'll leave it at that. Fast forward 30 years, my dad has settled down and now has a family of 5 kids with my mom. He gets a call from a non-profit asking if he'd provide his information if his kid wants to reach out. He does, and goes about his day. Fast forward a few months, he gets a call from his son, initially wanting to learn about possible health causes and curiosity. He ended up getting adopted by an amazing family and's doing very well for himself. He wants to come to town and meet my dad. Dad has 5 awkward conversations, his kids explaining we had another brother and he was coming up to visit. Note, a running insult when we were growing up was calling each other adopted, which pissed dad off a lot. Lol. Fast forward 2 weeks. There was a graduation this weekend and we're having all the family over, so was a good time for him to come up and meet the guy. Great person, hit it off and still are close with all the brothers. Everything worked out pretty good, all things considered. He's a spitting image of dad and really great friend. His parents are amazing people as well. Really lucky to have him in my life. Man, as someone who is adopted and knows his birth father has a family with 3 sons younger than me, there's nothing more I want than for something similar like this to happen. That being said, I'm aware that I was a mistake made by a couple young kids and I respect their courage to go through with the birth and find me an incredible home. I've done some reaching out and through third-party sources, I've learned that I am most likely a secret that has never been shared. They're all from an incredibly small town. I've seen pictures of my brothers and I looked exactly like each of them during those stages of life. It's mind-blowing to me to know I have blood relations somewhere out there. All this being said, I respect their privacy and their decision. I have no intention of causing turmoil or stress. Part of me has just always wanted to know more about the families I actually came from. P.S. I was raised by 2 incredible parents that have shown selflessness I can't fathom for someone thing they didn't even conceive. I wasn't adopted into a financially rich family, but I have an incredible wealth of moral grounding and have been taught that empathy and compassion are the 2 greatest strengths someone can have. I love my parents, Curiosity has just always gets the best of me.